Good day, everybody. Welcome to this edition of Barbara's Banter. My co host, Brian Boyer, and I are just delighted to have you again with us today. Over the past year, this podcast has fostered a discussion on such business issues as culture change, healthcare, women's history and women's impact in the business community, the nonprofit impact, customer service, race equity in the workplace, going back to the office after COVID, and COVID's impact on certain industries. Today, we're taking on workforce preparedness and its importance to the business community. We've heard so much in the news of late about the lack of workers in certain industries. Many left because of COVID and they have not returned. And while this is an important problem that has to be solved, another issue is we want to make sure that our prospective workforce is amply prepared for the types of jobs the business community is sourcing. We have two ideal guests today to discuss this subject and to challenge our thinking. Let me introduce them now. Anthony Wilbon is the Dean of the Business School at Howard University in Washington, D.C. Dean Wilbon has been at Howard since 2011 and assumed the dean's position last year in May. He's a true academic, having written several publications and technical reports. His degrees are from Michigan State, Howard University, and George Washington University. Our second guest is Michael Finney, the president and CEO of Miami-Dade Beacon Council, an economic development entity where he has been for about 5 years. He was also a lecturer at the Ross School of Business at the University of Michigan and was previously the president and CEO of the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. His degrees are from Saginaw Valley State University and from Central Michigan University. Gentlemen, welcome to Barbara's Banter.
Thank you so much. Pleasure to be here. Pleasure to be here.
So let me start with having each one of you talk about your respective organizations. This is your 2-minute commercial. So Mike, we'll start with you.
Sure. Thanks, Barbara. Yeah, the Miami-Dade Beacon Council serves as the official economic development partner for Miami-Dade County. There's 34 municipalities within the county, and then lots of other what we call unincorporated areas. We represent the entire county, and we're focused on business growth and development here in Miami-Dade County and the creation of good jobs, high-value, knowledge-intensive jobs here in Miami-Dade County. We work with our academic institutions, we work with government, and of course, we work with the private sector in the work that we do. We also serve as the secretariat for an initiative commonly referred to here as One Community, One Goal. But it really is about bringing opportunities to Miami. In fact, we're in the process of transitioning from One Community, One Goal to Opportunity Miami. So more to come about that. But essentially, we are the organization who is really focused on the economic heartbeat of Miami-Dade County. And we do that through working with both public and private sector partners and primarily focused on businesses and their growth and investment in Miami-Dade County.
Very good. Thank you. I noticed on your board, which so many economic development entities don't have, is you've got a lot of public officials on your board as well. So, but thank you for that. And that's a nice intro. And now we'll go to Dean Wilbon. Tell us a little bit. You're in my hometown. So I know Howard well because I've lived in Washington for 30 some years, and it's a mainstay of our city. So tell us a little bit about what you guys are doing at Howard.
Sure. Thank you, Barbara. So again, Howard University has a longstanding reputation of being very mission focused, mainly around activities associated with social justice, and have a long track record of actually addressing the needs of the nation in terms of diversity across all disciplines. And so again, the university itself has a long history of that. We have 13, 14 now colleges and schools within the university. Some of the more notable ones are, again, the School of Business, the medical school. Our fine arts department is very well known with all the actors and theater performers that we produce, and the law school, of course, because of the work that we do there. But overall, the university has a tradition of producing African Americans who are excelling in all industries. Particularly to the School of Business, we have been engaged with partnerships with corporate America for over 50 years now. We're celebrating our 51st year. And our goal is to build that pipeline of students who would go into executive spaces and make a difference in the workforce. And so we have relationships across all disciplines as well, with finance, accounting, marketing, information systems, supply chain management, and pride ourselves on developing programs, curricula, extracurricular activities, and center research that has an impact on all these industries and making an influence on the direction of where these entities are going from a corporate perspective.
Very good. And of course, you have a lot of famous people that have come through Howard, and one of the second highest level in government right now with the vice president. So, and you all have been in the news a lot over the last few months over a couple of other notable people that have joined the university. So, congratulations
Thank you so
on
much.
all of that. Maybe my first question to both of you is to how has preparing people for the different kinds of jobs that you both see. You see it, Tony, from an academic perspective, but I know you deal with business a lot. And Mike sees it, you're trying to get businesses into the Miami-Dade area, and you've got to have a prepared workforce if you're going to entice businesses to come to the Miami area. So tell me a little bit how looking at that and things have changed over the past 5 years. Either one can jump in.
Well, I guess I can start it from the academic perspective and hand it on to Mike so he can talk about the other end of the spectrum there.
Right.
But from an academic perspective, what we're seeing in terms of the changing workforce is the idea of what work looks like is changing. And I think a lot of that is emanating from our transition during the pandemic to be much more focused on virtual spaces. And we're trying to get our students to address those issues as well. So in the past 5 years, we've had a lot more focus on jobs that are encouraging students to be more technology literate, so that they understand how to apply technology, and which requires us to infuse our curriculum with things like data analytics, things like cybersecurity, and to make sure that our students understand, maybe not from the pure technical engineering perspective about these things, but how those aspects impact the application of finding business solutions in the workforce. And so we're trying to make sure our curriculum is built around that. Secondly, I think there's a great deal of interest around understanding from a corporate perspective, financing and finance literacy. How do you analyze the value of a company? And how do you understand how that value can be enhanced through the work and the mission of the organization, and how you can have an impact on that as an individual. So all those, I think, need to be infused. And then I think lastly, most importantly, we're recognizing that the need for diversity in the workforce is impacting a lot of these companies. And so we have a lot of companies who are looking at ways to diversify their workforce, understanding that a diverse workforce has an impact on the bottom line. And I think that's been borne out in several research studies. And so those things are actually changing the scope in which companies are looking at our students and asking us to prepare them differently than we have in the past 50 years.
You know, that's interesting. And I will perhaps talk a little bit more about diversity later on in the podcast. But I know how I've had to change from a technology standpoint in the way we do our consulting businesses. And I have kicked and screamed every step of the way because I'd much rather be in person. I think that's when I'm at my best, is right with people. And so it's a little harder. I conducted a leadership program last week. First time I've done this on Zoom for 75 people. And I will tell you, it was unnerving because I feed off the audience participation, and I couldn't quite see whether they were agreeing or accepting what I was saying. And so it took me a while to get into my rhythm. It got there, but it is different than being in person with your audience. Either they're nodding or frowning or whatever. So I know how technology has changed all of us over this past year or so. Mike, what about you're looking at things in the for the past 5 years, and how have you seen that change? Because you've been in your current role just that 5 years, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So building off of the dean's comments and even yours, Barbara, the thing that we are seeing a lot more stressed by the companies that we work with is not necessarily a need for the traditional college graduate with a 4-year degree or with a master's degree, or even, jobs that are entry level that require a high school degree. We're seeing a demand more for individuals that have stackable credentials, right? In other words, they go through some type of a training program. That training program then leads them to an opportunity in the workplace. That opportunity in the workplace then evolves into additional training that allows them to continue building on the credential that they had earned, and they continue to move their way up the organization. We're finding that to be much more a scenario in the workplace than we historically saw. In fact, many even tech companies now, I just literally finished a meeting with a tech company a few minutes before starting this webinar, and that tech company was talking to us about not focusing on a workforce that is primarily college graduates with degrees in technology, but for focusing on individuals who are economically distressed in communities that typically don't have access to the technology they need in order to be successful. And their model is to provide that and to really take advantage of this incredible talent pool that's available that most often gets overlooked. And they're building an entire business model around that type of individual. And we're seeing that more and more. So stackable credentials is something that we're hearing more from workers, and we're hearing it a lot more from employers as a way of coming into an organization and moving up. The other thing that we're seeing a lot more of are individuals who choose to be self-employed, sometimes referred to as gig economy workers.
Right.
And they're not focused on a single employer, but they're focused on providing their services to a variety of employers. And that gives them incredible flexibility around the type of work that they do and the growth and the amount of income they can earn, et cetera. And we're seeing a lot more of that. And it seems to align very well with what we've seen with the pandemic, right? Where virtually every employer had to figure out how to quickly pivot to enable their workers to perform remotely. And yet there's a whole pool of workers that had already played in that space well before the pandemic struck.
Sure.
And they now have become, frankly, the consultants that's showing others how to effectively operate in a remote work environment. So gig economy workers is the other thing that we're seeing a lot of. But then just to get back to the dean's comments, technology workers are in extremely high demand in Miami. Banking and financial services, extremely high demand. Trade and logistics, high demand. Healthcare, all in extremely high demand right now. And there simply doesn't seem to be enough workers to meet the demands across any of those sectors, even though our colleges and universities and other training academies are doing everything they can to keep up with the demand that's there.
Yeah. If I might, Barbara,
Sure.
I'd like to add to that. I think that's one of the points that Mike made, and both of them are fantastic, actually. But the stackable credential thing is something that we've been working with as well as a university. Now, one of the challenges we have as a university is we're not a trade school. So, of course, we can't get into taking kids out of high school and directing them through a trade program. But we do recognize that, for example, in cybersecurity, there's a dearth of talent in that space. And you don't necessarily need to have a 4-year degree to jump into that space. And so certificate programs are ideal. And we've been working with, for example, some of the local companies, some of the local government agencies around helping to build certificate programs that would enhance the workforce development around that particular space. And again, we have to kind of keep our identity as a university and still focus on 4-year, but we see that there's a gap there that we can help fill And I think to Mike's point, that is certainly something that's important for us as an institution and other universities to try to kind of dip our toe in the water about this and try to make a contribution to finding a solution to that problem.
Is this where community colleges may also step in and help with the certificate program, do you think?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree 100%. And I know probably down in Miami, there are quite a few that are very, very well known.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, I think the idea of the government investing in community colleges is critically important because of that need. And that's one way it could be addressed.
Well,
here in Miami-Dade County, yeah, we have I think we have the largest college in the United States, Miami-Dade College. I think their enrollment's in excess of 125,000 students.
Wow.
And they offer an amazing array of different programs. But even more importantly, with the extensive programming they have, they will also do customized curriculum for employers that have unique requirements. And so we really find them to be an amazing partner here in the area to provide that kind of service.
You also, I'm sorry, Barbara. I just want to interject quickly on this topic. It's really interesting. But do both of you also find that, I know, like here, for example, in Connecticut, we have a very prestigious history around manufacturing, and so there are a lot of technical schools and maybe a different route than the standard to what you were saying before about the 4-year college, the grad school, and then maybe even some of the debt that you take on right when you do go through that. And sometimes you can go to trade school and you can get a great job and be making fairly decent money, right out of high school or out of 2-year technical school or whatnot. Is that also something that you're seeing as another way of enticing our workforce to possibly fill some of those jobs? Is again maybe avoiding the 4 years or even 8 years of education and debt and having maybe a nice career, stable career coming out of school? Are you seeing that trend?
Well, I'd say it's a very important option. Ironically, it was an option when I was in high school back in the early 1970s. And we had 2 tracks. We had a vocational track and we had a college prep track. Mm-hmm. And those students who went on the vocational track, whether it was, to be a mechanic or an electrician or a carpenter or whatever the case may be, those individuals also enjoyed incredibly good standards of living. Many of my high school classmates and friends have long since retired, and they probably have millions of dollars, and they have, a vacation home and a main home. They did exceptionally well for themselves, even though they decided to pursue one of the trades. Today, those options are still available. We currently have 3 active programs in partnership with Miami-Dade College, Career Source South Florida, and a couple other organizations to provide auto mechanics training. And it's really not mechanics anymore, it's auto technicians.
Technology.
Where they're learning about electrification of cars, right? Things like that we didn't think about, autonomous vehicles. And so it's very different, and it's a different kind of training that requires different skill sets, but it doesn't require that individual to necessarily pursue a 4-year degree. And their earning potential is definitely well into 6 figures once they are a viable a mechanic, if you will, or a technician within that trade. We see the same kind of thing in some other disciplines as well. So we think credentials that lead to vocational types of employment opportunities have the potential to provide the same quality of living that an individual could enjoy by pursuing a 4-year degree in many cases.
We did I think a disservice some years ago, at least certainly in Washington, and I would imagine other jurisdictions. We got rid of the vocational schools. And a lot of that was because minority parents felt that the school system was tracking their children to a vocational rather than to college. And all of a sudden, then we don't have anybody prepared because those jobs are now very technical in nature, and you need a different set of skills. I think in DC, I think we brought back I'm not as involved in that anymore, but I think we do have a technical or what used to be a vocational school again, but that just happened over the last couple of years or so. We had nothing for a good number of years.
I don't know if you also found this, Barbara, just also on that as well. I sort of found when I was growing up, it was almost frowned upon
That's right.
Those trade school kids, they're not as smart as the ones that are going to the 4 years colleges.
Exactly.
Although when it comes to a lot of those technical pieces, I'll tell you something. Thank goodness for plumbers. Thank goodness for auto technicians. I'm lucky if I can change a light bulb half the time, right? So and Barbara, this could be a question for you too, but everyone on the group here. Have you seen that change? Now it's almost, I feel like it's changed that perception now. Again, Michael, to your point, you can have those 2 or 3 homes, right? You can make a very nice career out of it, a stable career. Are you seeing that perception change that I'm not going to fail if I don't go to a 4-year college and then get my grad school degree? Are you seeing that perception change among the students and among the workforce in your communities? Both of you?
I can add that I'm in the business of college education, so I have to say that up front. But I do recognize, like Mike, I went to a high school that gave you those 2 tracks, and I was on the vocational track at one point and went and studied to be an electrician and jumped into college anyway. So you can bounce back and forth. But we have to recognize, and I think we do, that college is not for everyone. Sure. Everybody's not meant to go to college, but you can still have a very good living in other ways. And so I think to Brian's question, you're starting to see a lot more advertisements on television for the ITTs and the DeVries and those kind of things. And people recognize that you can have a very good living as a skilled trades person. There's nothing wrong with that. And I think the colleges themselves are becoming much more competitive to get into, and people are going to have to look for alternatives in order to make a living. So I don't see anything wrong with it. I don't think there's a denigration of the trade school at all.
And I would also add that in addition to those traditional trades that we are all familiar with, areas like technology, cybersecurity, things like that, healthcare, even banking and finance. These are areas that historically required 4-year degrees, and almost across the board, they have now moved toward earning credentials that can get you in the door. And then an individual can decide to pursue additional education and training beyond that. So some of the red hot professions right now have actually made that shift. So it's not just strictly about, the auto mechanic, the plumber, the electrician. It's areas like technology, healthcare, and banking and finance that's also creating those kinds of vocational opportunities.
You mentioned earlier about some of the industries that are looking for workers in the Miami area. And I wonder, Tony, whether are there any hot industries that your constituency will tell you that you need to prepare students for? I know one in particular, but I'll let you move to talk about that.
Sure. Well, I mentioned cybersecurity. That's, again, a hot one for us. If I look at some of the investments that have come our way from some of the companies, there are a couple of different areas that I think would be considered hot, and I'd like to get Mike's perspective about this on the other side as well. But digital marketing, trying to understand how to provide a customized marketing impact for the customer base. That's a big thing. Understanding data, how to take that data that you've collected about individuals and create a specific customized marketing experience. That's one thing. Data analytics. Again, I mentioned that. We even had this huge investment in the university around building a data science center, and how we actually understand data, collect data, analyze it. That's a huge problem, a huge issue that everybody has to try to tackle, and we don't have enough people to do it. And that encompasses a multidisciplinary approach. That's not just engineering. It's the liberal arts side. It's the business side. There's a finance side. There's a legal aspect to it. So it's a multidisciplinary approach to that. And then if we talk about if I think about just some of the investments we've had lately, alternative finance, hospitality, and the breadth of the hospitality space is not just hotel and restaurants. We're talking about the technology aspects. Travelocity is a hospitality entity, Airbnb, even Uber, for that matter. So things are changing around how we view these industries. And because these industries are changing, we have to adapt to provide them with the skill sets that are going to help them address some of the needs that they have in today's environment versus what we did years ago.
Talk about one of my favorite topics is real estate, and particularly from a diversity standpoint, and I mean commercial real estate, not residential, more commercial. And how do we, because that's an industry that you don't have a huge minority population in. And so how do we get our students, and you and I've talked about this before, Tony, and we've done some things to try to move that forward in Washington. But how do we get our students more focused on that? It's a huge demand, and a lot of money can be made in that space. Yet we don't have as many people of color entering that space.
Sure. Yeah. And that's been, again, I've gotten a lot of attention from the real estate industry around that concept. And it kind of folds into hospitality as well. For example, we received a pretty significant investment from Marriott to create a center for hospitality. One of the subcomponents of that center is going to be commercial real estate, because hospitality has a huge real estate aspect to it and component to it. And so we want to try to infuse into our kids an understanding about how real estate works, the financial and capital markets associated with real estate, which is critically important. And not only that, I think to one of Mike's points, the entrepreneurial aspect of it. How do we build the skill sets within students to understand how you can go about making real estate a career from an entrepreneurial perspective, having your own hotels, creating your own commercial real estate spaces. All that is critically important. And so we're building that construct within the school of business as we speak, because of all the demand that's out there. And the diversity, as you mentioned, Barbara, is critically important, because many of those spaces are not diverse right now. Right. And so we're trying to feed those into the industry and collaboration with them to get the students prepared.
Mike, what about real estate in your area? I assume that's very huge. Every time I go down to your area, there's nothing but building going on all around the Miami area.
Yeah, construction cranes are nonstop in Miami-Dade County, and that's a good thing. The reality is that the available land is one of the most scarce commodities we have here. And so you tend to go vertical. So hence you'll see more cranes, because if you need large scale developments, you're probably going to end up going vertical with them, including the parking to support it. Rarely will you see surface parking lots associated with buildings. There will likely be a vertical parking lot to go with it. Even car dealers have vertical, parking garages to support their needs. So I would say, as a general comment, Black and brown people are underrepresented across virtually every industry sector, whether you look at a vertical industry like cybersecurity, or if you look at a platform like technology or healthcare, whatever. We are significantly underrepresented. And that says to me that even though we've made a lot of strides, there's still a lot of work to do in our recruitment. Support for the HBCUs is great that Dean Wilbon is on, representing Howard University. Here, we have Florida Memorial University. They are one of our partners, by the way. There are 6 colleges and universities here that we work in close partnership with. So in addition to Miami-Dade, there's Florida Memorial, HBCU, Florida International, University of Miami, Barry, and St. Thomas. And all of those universities and colleges really have a very aggressive focus on educating Black and brown students. Florida Memorial, I think, educates more Black and Hispanic students than any other college in the state of Florida, and perhaps one of the largest in the United States. Miami-Dade College, I already talked about the size of that institution and its student base. And of course, Florida Memorial is an HBCU. I mean, it's important that at every level, from K through 12, right on through to our colleges and universities, that we literally bring information, bring knowledge, and bring opportunities into those educational settings, so that our students are pursuing professional opportunities once it's time for them to do that in those sectors. And so we're just simply underrepresented in most of these professions, and everything that we can do to create more opportunities, I think, is just important.
Interesting. Brian, do you want to jump in with a question or two here?
Yeah, that'd be great. And we're starting to wind down here a little bit. I feel like this is there are some podcasts out there that are about 4 hours.
Yeah, we won't make ours that long.
I don't think that will go over well, but this is obviously a great topic, and I do want to just ask both of you because, and Tony, you mentioned, marketing, digital marketing. And so that obviously piqued my interest because that's a lot of the work that I do is in that sector and also in economic development. And I want to ask both of you this question because I think you can both offer very unique perspectives on this. As you're kind of as we're telling the workforce story. And Tony, I'm guessing that probably you're hoping that maybe a lot of the students that that come through Howard will eventually maybe stay in DC and contribute to the workforce there. And Michael, I'm sure you are trying to attract people from around the world and around the country. You're both it's obviously a very diverse city, Miami, Washington, very diverse cities, global cities. What's the story? What's the selling point? Why DC? Why Howard? And talking about diversity and technology and everything we've kind of covered here today. Same thing with Miami. Why? What's the story that you're telling to attract people into your workforces? Technology is obviously, we've shrunk a little bit now, right? The world shrinks a little bit when we can, you can have somebody in London maybe doing some work with you or for you, right? But when you're out there kind of telling your story about what you do and filling those jobs and creating a workforce that's contributing to the local economy, what is that story that you're telling? Let's start, Tony, you, and then Michael. I'd love to hear about Miami as well.
Sure. And so I think one of the key stories that Howard can tell, and the School of Business as well, in particular, that's intriguing to students is the international perspective you would get by coming to Howard and being in Washington. I think that's critically important. Business today is a global phenomena. You cannot work for a company and not have some exposure to some kind of international perspective and be successful. And so the fact that we have built an institution in the heart of the nation's capital that has that focus is very intriguing to a lot of people, and not just for the business school, for almost every discipline major that we have here. And so we try to fold that into what we do as well. As for example, in the School of Business, we have study tours where we've taken students all over the world. And for years, we've taken them to China, taken them to South Africa, so that they can understand that you have to be multicultural in your thinking in order to find business solutions that are going to be effective. And so that's the sell, I think, for us, not only the location of DC, but the access to the international perspectives that you would have by being at Howard and in DC.
Michael, same to you. I know Miami is a tremendous eclectic city of incredible diversity, incredible, worldly. What are you doing to attract the workforce to your region?
I'd probably start by saying the obvious. Miami is paradise, right? If you think about a place where you can live, work, and play, that is just ideally suited, 365 days a year, Miami probably is on your list. The reality is that a lot of folks, especially young folks who have choices about where they want to live and work, and simply did not have Miami on their short list. And principally because it had been viewed far more as a play location than as a work and live location. And so we'd get incredible numbers of people visiting the community on a regular basis, having a great time, and then going back to wherever their live and work scenario was. I can tell you, I personally came here about 5 years ago. And my wife and I, during the interview and selection process, we thought we were coming to Miami for a really nice long weekend. That would be the worst case scenario if there wasn't any interest in the job in either direction. After coming here and realizing that Miami is a serious business location with great opportunities in financial services and healthcare and creative design and trade and logistics and technology, in aerospace, just to name a few, it was really obvious to me that not only was this a great live and play place, it was an incredible workplace. So what we do is we package up those three very simple topics that we all know are important when making a decision about your long-term future. So we make the case that this is an incredible place to live, and most of us understand that. We make the case that it's an incredible place to play. But we also introduce this incredible lineup of companies that we have in these key industry sectors where you're going to have opportunities to grow professionally, unlike any place else. And at the end of the day, when you're dead tired from putting in a good day's work, you're a 15-minute drive to the most incredible beaches that you can find any place in the world, and many other options that you simply can't get in most other places around the United States.
You already heard Brian wants to move to Miami. So I think that was the sales pitch to get him there.
Yeah, I think Mike far outsold Washington.
Well, DC is the furthest south that I've ever gotten, and that was certainly not. I loved it, but it certainly wasn't tropical. But I want to turn this back to you, and I just want to ask one more question.
Go right ahead.
But you do raise a good point. I want to ask you both, because really DC and Miami are two amazing. They're really amazing cities, and you do have a lot of people that are visiting those cities. Maybe it might be a leisure trip, but I would think that there are ways to maybe leverage. I mean, there are young professionals that are maybe coming down there and visiting and be, this might be a good place to settle. In both cities, I'm saying, they're visiting the nation's capital. There's so much history there. There's so much to see there. They're going down to Miami, and maybe there are decision makers. Maybe there's a CEO of a startup someplace that's down in one of your areas. Is the tourism industry also kind of a way to leverage economic development and business as well? And how do you do that?
Yeah, I'll start with this one because I've had a lot of experience in both spaces. In fact, before coming to Miami, I led economic development for the state of Michigan. Barbara referenced that in my bio. But my responsibility not only included economic development, but also workforce development and tourism. And we actually built our whole marketing campaign around a combination of tourism growth and business growth. We have the opportunity to do the exact same thing here in Miami. And so as we've become more sophisticated in our marketing efforts, we're using a lot of the digital tools, the stuff that you got excited about, Brian, that you do, and using those digital tools to help us, tools like geofencing and sponsored media, where, we can identify individuals that are not just interested in all the sun and fun that's available here, but also in understanding the business climate. We can reach those individuals and we can tell our story in using very creative marketing tools that just 10 years ago would have made it much more challenging. So we're reaching the people we need to reach. We're reaching the venture capitalists. We're reaching the entrepreneurs. We're reaching the financial services people. We're reaching the business owners and the business executives who have summer homes here. And we're telling them the story of how not only can they have a summer home here, they can actually have an office and a workforce here that's going to, by the way, have a lower tax costs, individual taxes, and they're going to have a better regulatory environment than they may have in wherever their current location is at. So we're able to do that, and we can do it pretty effectively.
Yeah, I'll add briefly about Washington, Brian. I often say that Washington is probably one of the more unique cities in the country, and I use the analogy of in most every city in the country, you can kind of drop me on any corner, and they probably all look the same. They're going to be high rises and all that other stuff. You drop me in DC, I'm going to know I'm in DC because of the nature of the landscape and so forth. So it's a very unique city, and it's changed a lot over the last few years to be very youth oriented. So a lot more people are moving back into the city. It's becoming more walkable than it had been in the past. You'll see corner stores popping up and restaurants, people sitting out on sidewalks. So that's changing the landscape and the vibrancy of the city, which is changing the workforce and the diversity of the workforce. So DC is not just a government hub anymore. Just about any type of work you want, you will find it in the DC area. Technology is being exposed here. A lot more companies are coming for that matter. Some of it is driven by government because of the contracting aspect of it, but others are not. There's a financial sector that's growing, and hospitality is always huge because of the tourism. So it's a very diverse city, very young city. It's changing constantly, and so I think that's an appeal to a lot of the folks who are looking for that type of lifestyle. And it's not a big city. DC is really a relatively small town. And so you don't get overwhelmed by the size of some of the larger cities as well. So there's some aspects to it, I think, that are appealing to a lot of people.
That was a great pitch. I used to be president and CEO of the DC Chamber of Commerce, so I needed you to help me with my pitch.
hope I did you a good
did.
service.
It was great. I could have written it myself.
I don't know, Barbara. What do you think? I'm thinking maybe. So I'll definitely keep my my Northeast home here, but maybe a home in DC and a home in Miami in the next few years. That could be the goal.
You got it. You'll have it all. You have it all.
I'll pass it back to you, Barbara, to kind of wrap it up here. Thanks.
Well, I think I have a couple of questions. One directed to the dean, and that is one of the things we hear often about academia is that universities are terrific for the academics, but sometimes we don't bridge what's taught in the classroom with what the workforce actually needs. So how do you bridge that gap between learning in the classroom and transferring that to the world of work?
Sure. So one of the terms you may have heard recently is this concept of experiential learning. And that is the concept of bringing experience into the classroom and marrying the two while they're in school. And so we've focused on theory and concepts for a very long time, but we want to try to build that bridge by bringing companies into the classroom so that students can get that experience real time while they're learning. And so we build a lot of programs around that. The university has and the School of Business has. I'll give you just one or two examples. For example, the university has a relationship with Google. We have a campus out, Google West is what we call it, or Howard West. It's on the Google campus. And students will spend a semester or a year out on the Howard West campus, which is the Google site, working with Google engineers. Our faculty out there working with the students spend an entire semester taking classes there. And so while they're learning about the theories of programming, they're also learning from Google and how they do it there. Our faculty are learning from Google, and then they can bring it back into the classroom and share with the other students. We have classes where consultants will come in and bring real world projects to the students, and they will work on them for a semester in consultation with people at those companies. And so building that bridge, this experiential learning exercise, is one way that the universities are adapting to meeting just the challenges that you suggested, Barbara, and that we're not just a theory-based entity.
Right.
We have to make sure we can address some of the workforce needs.
Right. And we are delighted. I mean, how I met you was because I'm on the board of a publicly traded REIT out of Atlanta, Piedmont Office Realty, and we're delighted about this partnership that we're starting now, and getting some students engaged with us such that they learn the real estate business, and hopefully one day they'll be ready for us to hire.
Absolutely.
One final question to both of you. And that is one of the things that's really important to me, and that is that our students or our workforce come with really great soft skills. It's not just the technical skills that they have, but they have all the other things that makes the complete package. What skills do you focus on, or do your, in your case, Mike, do your businesses tell you that they really need, and how do we focus on that?
Yeah, so I actually have my master's degree is in human resources.
Okay.
And a lot of my focus during my education was, in fact, around those soft skills that were critically important to the success of individuals coming into an organization. The ability to effectively communicate. The ability to, especially for leadership positions, to show empathy and to deal with empathy, writing skills. I mean, it's all the real basic stuff that we hear from employers that's really important. And the specifics of the job, most employers have a lot of in-house capability to train for. But if an individual doesn't come with the soft skills, it's a longer learning curve than many employers want to take. And so we try and make sure that we're partnering up with organizations throughout Miami-Dade County who focus on providing that kind of education and training. One of our most important partners here is CareerSource South Florida. They have a variety of different organizations that they invest dollars in for training. And a lot of that training is, in fact, upfront soft skills training so that those workers are prepared to take that next step of then going into the workplace and really learning the specifics of a particular employer's requirements. So still very important. Basic communication is something that we simply can't avoid. And so having that and being able to effectively do it is one of the critical skills that we frequently hear from employers that is simply lacking in a lot of the individuals that show up these days.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Tony, what about what do you prepare your students for?
Could not agree more with Mike. We believe in that, and we believed in that for a long time. And we make sure that we have created programs as early as the first day of freshman year to help students build those communication skills and those soft skills. Our business orientation class is built around developing the students' communication skills, helping them to understand how to present themselves in professional environments, how to dress in professional environments. And when you meet a Howard student, you will know that they've been trained very thoroughly about how to introduce themselves, how to speak well, how to present information, how to digest and listen as part of the communication channel. We think it's very important, so that we've made it part of the curriculum, which is a very engaged and active part of the curriculum, because we think it's critically important that they have those skill sets. As Mike said, most companies will train you in what they need to know technically.
Mm-hmm.
But those soft skills, if you don't have them, that's really the key to whether you succeed or not.
Right. And
By the way, Barbara, there was one other thing that I wanted to mention, and that is social media and how that plays into how an individual is viewed coming into the workplace. And so we always, because we have some workforce programs that we're involved with, we try and make sure that individuals are understanding their presence and how it is received by employers who may be paying attention.
Right. Excellent point. Excellent point.
Good and bad. Good and bad.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
Absolutely.
People have been turned down because of things that have gone on in their on their social media accounts. So it's a very, very good point. Gentlemen, it looks like that's all the time that we have today, and we are so grateful that you chose to give us about an hour of your time. Dean Wilbon and Michael Finney, thank you so much for joining us today. You gave us so much to think about, prepare for, and how, kind of how we move forward in this space, because the environment is changing ever so much and every day. I'd like to thank our audience for being with us today. Once again, I hope that you got a lot of from our discussion today. And as I do at the end of all the or at least the recent podcasts, please remember my book, Leadership Lessons from the Top of the Ladder, starting with Madam President. It's a quick read and a good read, but some lessons that can be learned, and it can be ordered from Amazon. Thank you, everybody, and see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.